Hola, hola, alo aloha, hola, hola. Aloha, 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 bros and broettes. We'll just do the Hawaiian version. Mahalo. All right.
There you go.
It's the medication. Welcome back. Hey, everybody. Welcome back to Game of Crimes. Thank you guys once again for joining in with us. We've got a little bit of a different format this time, but as always, we always start off with I'm Morgan Wright, the host with the most hair, all that good stuff. And here, literally, with my partner in crime,
Steve Murphy, but you know me as Murph.
Yes, ma'am and sir. Yes, thank you guys for joining us. The script calls for a little bit of small talk, which we just did. We're going to get into the housekeeping now. Just head on over to Apple, Spotify, hit those 5 stars, the reviews and stuff. We really appreciate that. Really helps us out quite a bit. Also, head on over to our gameofcrimespodcast.com, especially for our guests we have coming up. We'll tell you about him in a minute. He's also got a book, a fiction book that he wrote loosely based upon his experiences between California and Baghdad. So from Beverly Hills to Baghdad, we're going to find out what's going on. We got merch there, in our mailing list. Also follow us on that thing they call social media at Game of Crimes on Twitter, at Game of Crimes on Facebook and Instagram. But where you got to be, Murph, I'm going to ask you one more time. Where do you got to be?
You got to come over and check us out on Patreon. That's on content that you're not going to hear on the regular podcast, although we might have a little surprise coming up in December. But we have everything from a monthly live stream to a monthly Q&A where you can ask us anything to we just recorded. You can't make this shit up. And
it went to a dark place this time.
I'm not sure where Morgan got all this information. He does all the research. He surprises me with it. And so I can be just nauseously shocked as well as you. And there's several other things. We do a case review. There's stuff on there that you're just not going to hear anywhere else. You're going to hear more of our personal opinions if you're interested in that. We try to stay focused on our guest here on the regular podcast. So come over, try us out, tell your friends about us. Christmas is coming up. That'd be a great Christmas gift to give your friends, a subscription to our Patreon channel. So check us out.
It's the gift that keeps on giving. And how you find us is at patreon.com/Game of Crimes. That's patreon.com/Game of Crimes. One more time. That's 1-800 patreon.com/Game of Crimes. Don't do the 1-800. I'm just joking. All right. So anyway, guys, hey, by the way, this is a show about crime. We talk about bad people doing bad things and bad people doing bad things to good people. By law, we have to take ourselves seriously, but what, Murph?
We never take ourselves serious. We're going to have some fun on the shows.
Yeah, and we're going to have fun because one of the ways you have fun, too, is that you also go over and you join our Game of Crimes fan club run by our favorite mafia queen, Sandy Salvato. Just even get in the ballpark, answer a couple questions, and we will determine if you are deemed worthy to have interest into that most sacred and, of places, which is called the Game of Crimes fan club. So head on over there, search that, right? Just answer a couple questions. But we got a lot of fun stuff going on. We got a great stuff going on, but Murph, we can't get to it until I ask you the one. There's 2 questions I ask, but the first question I ask is, do you know what time it is?
I do. It's time for
Small Town Police Blotter. Hey, so we got some good stuff coming in. This first one comes from, it's just the headline. Woman cops to meat beating at Ohio Walmart.
Uh-oh. Just the title of that sounds pornographic.
Victim was struck in face with 10-pound tube of beef. Oh. This is sounding more like a video shoot that went bad. A Ohio woman. And by the way, this happened in South Euclid, Ohio, population 21,388. Salute. An Ohio woman yesterday copped to clobbering a female acquaintance in the face with a 10-pound log of ground beef during a confrontation in the potato chip aisle.
Well, what
in
was
the Walmart
in the potato chip aisle?
Apparently attacking her with a log of beef. So, according to police, Garner was at a Walmart in South Euclid when she encountered victim Precious Jackson, who was shopping with her 7-year-old daughter. Garner was accompanied by her 5-year-old son. Jackson, who had lived downstairs from Garner in a University Heights duplex, had previously secured a protection order against her ex-neighbor. Well, apparently, folks, let me tell you, protection orders aren't worth the paper they're written on. So cops say that when Garner, the suspect, confronted Jackson in the Walmart potato chip aisle, she threatened to beat up Jackson and her daughter. She then pulled down Jackson's face mask and attempted to spit on her, and when that didn't work, She reached into Jackson's cart and removed the $22 meat log. I like the way they call it a meat log. They described the tube of ground beef as a blunt object.
A 10-pound blunt object.
Officer, I just had a date go bad. My date tried to assault me with a blunt object.
Oh, jeez. Okay.
Garner investigators charged struck Jackson a couple of times in the face with a 10-pound log of prepackaged ground beef. She was arrested at the scene, and a relative took custody of her son. Jackson, fortunately, was not injured by the meat blows.
Let's move on. Next story, please.
All right. This next one comes to us from Hollis, New Hampshire, population 7,945. Salute. Steve, a house painter accused of taking a $7,000 diamond engagement ring from a condo he was working at, swallowed the ring during a break from questioning at the police station, and it was caught on tape. The 44-year-old painter was charged with theft and falsifying evidence. Doctors had to perform emergency surgery on the man to get the 12-carat diamond ring out. He was arraigned from his hospital bed. Police said the ring had been hidden under a mattress in a room where he had been hired to work. He was hiding the ring for his brother, so his brother's girlfriend wouldn't see it until the time was right. Police brought the painter in for questioning. During a break and with investigators out of the room for a few minutes, a security camera caught him swallowing the ring. I'm not sure what goes through people's mind when you're in public and there's camera in everywhere, but yeah, it's on tape. I'll tell you what goes through their mind. It's the same thing that's going to go through their asshole when you try and crap a 12-carat ring. It's going to hurt on the way out. That's why they did surgery.
A 12-carat diamond ring was only worth $7,000?
Maybe it was the way it was cut.
Zirconia.
Yeah, maybe it wasn't a real diamond. I don't know. We'll have to ask the interwebs that. We'll go to Al Gore's Amazing Internet and ask: is there a what's the value of a 7,000 or a 12-carat diamond ring?
Well, how big is a 12-carat ring? Oh, that's huge.
I don't know, dude. I don't live in that income bracket, so.
Me either. Holy cow.
Well, hey, there's one more here. So this comes to us from Southbury, Connecticut, population 19,656. Salute. So, Steve.
Yes.
This is the gift that keeps on giving. This sounds like something would happen in a DEA case. A man's plan to bail himself out after a drug bust went a little bit awry over the weekend. With the aid of a drug-sniffing dog, police found 48 grams of cocaine on the 32-year-old man after pulling him over for speeding. Okay, not the crime of the century, but, 48 grams, enough to go to jail, right?
Mm-hmm.
The suspect then arranged for his aunt to bring a small safe, which he claimed contained money for his bail. But when the aunt opened the safe in front of the state trooper, they found cash, drug paraphernalia, and another 16 grams of cocaine. Additional charges were filed against the man, including felony stupidity.
There you go.
And his bond was increased to $125,000. He was later bailed out by yet another relative. So he was charged with possession of narcotics with intent to sell, possession of drug paraphernalia, cocaine, and marijuana, and speeding.
You got to get that speeding in there. What an idiot.
Folks, we just report the news.
Law. How can I compound this and make it even worse? Oh,
I'm so stoned I forget I got dope and paraphernalia in the place where I'm hiding my money, and which was probably seized too as being proceeds of drug sales. So anyway, thus endeth the reading for today. We shall mercifully move along and get into talking about this episode. So we embedded the outro at the end, but we didn't embed the intro. Like I said, we're trying a couple of different formats to see what works better. On a couple of these, like with Tim Stommel, we had him in for the small town police blotter. This one we're doing by ourselves. So just give us some feedback as we work on fine-tuning our new format for the beginning of the year. By the way, speaking of the beginning of the year, just that you guys know, we will be taking all of December off for a couple reasons. Number one is we've got some new format we want to work on. We've got some really big guests Smurf is working on, so we have to get those recorded in December because we want to come out of January with a bang. And the other reason, what we're going to do too, is we will not go away, but we will take some of our favorite Patreon episodes from the different things we do. 911, you can't make this shit up. Let's say Q&A, things like that, and we're going to play those episodes instead during December while we're gone. But trust us, when we come back in January, we will be bloated for bear, as they say.
Oh, I can't wait. We've got some guests lined up that you have read about. I'm guessing you never thought you'd hear them here on Game of Crimes. And this comes through not only our contacts, but we're at the point now with Game of Crimes where we have people contacting us with suggestions for potential guests on the show, and these are great suggestions. I mean, holy cow! You're going to hear about cases that you read about in the news.
A couple of them. One of my friends you met with down at ICP, Rick Zach from Microsoft, introduced you to a guy that we're going to get on the show.
Yep.
Some great stories. But this one, Steve, tell everybody how we got Gary Edgington, because we actually had to. Neither one of us knew Gary, so we had to check his ass out.
Yep. So this came in as a recommendation from a good friend of ours. We take very seriously who we bring on the show here. We just don't, we have a lot of people recommend that we bring military heroes on the show, and they absolutely deserve a place. But Game of Crimes is more about law enforcement. So we're always looking for the law enforcement connection, but we don't accept just everybody. We want somebody that has a good, interesting story that we actually vet, and we did that with Gary through several law enforcement professionals that we know around the country. And he came through with flying colors. And I think you're going to love his story once you hear it here. But one of the cool things about him is the book that he wrote. And I got to look it up here again.
Inside the Wire,
which we're going to talk more about in the show. But I highly recommend it. It's a book I got on Kindle. I was flying out to Dallas and then San Diego and back, and I had read the book by the time I got back. That's how interesting I found it. So I think you're going to like what you're going to hear today.
Well, and trust me, he's got a great story. So from Beverly Hills to Baghdad, and by the way, he was there when the actual Beverly Hills Cop was being filmed. They modeled Axel Foley after him and his exploits.
That's not really. He's sticking to it.
That's right. Hey, but there's only one way we can find out about the story, Murph, and I have to ask you: Are you ready? Are you ready to play the biggest, baddest, most dangerous game of all? This game we call Game of Crimes.
Hey, everybody, this has some international connections. So get in, sit down, shut up, and hold on. Come on, Gary, let's hear your story here, brother.
All right, welcome back, you amigos, players, playerettes, dudettes, everybody in between. This is going to be another exciting episode. How do I know it's going to be exciting? Because I'm on it. And Murph's on it.
Excuse me.
And we got a special guest. So now this guy, here's the thing. Here's Murph's and I's approach. We know a lot of people, so when we bring them onto the podcast, they're already vetted because we know them, or somebody we trust knows them. But with Gary, though, you were a little bit different, man. We had to do some. I freaking had to call the CIA. Murph had to call SOCOM. I mean, we had to check your ass out before we let you on. But you have made it on the Game of Crimes. So welcome, Gary Edgington.
Very good. I appreciate that. If SOCOM acknowledged my existence, then there's a problem.
No, they didn't. But the fact is, when they go, we can neither confirm nor deny. But you know, and I know, if they don't like you, they're going to go, we can neither confirm nor deny. But if we ever see that son of a bitch again, tell them to lose our number. Yeah,
exactly.
You may not feel like this when the podcast's over either, Gary, but honored to have you on here, brother. Thanks for putting up with our bullshit. And it's just starting, by the way. So let's see how this goes.
I gathered that. I am a detective. I did hear a bit.
Yeah, see, Murph, just pick on detectives. Murph's got this Fed. I'm a Fed. We're better than everybody else. He likes to pick on us state and local guys.
No, I was never in the bureau. I don't have that kind of attitude. I was a local uniform cop before I became a Fed.
All three of us were.
One thing that you and I weren't, Gary, was a trooper.
That is true, but I did work for the state of California Department of Justice, and that was an all roads, all codes sort of situation as well.
You are the third person that has said that. Did you ever know a guy named Scott Howland from CHP?
No.
Scott ended up being kind of like a commander, a CIO, and other stuff. But he worked his road up. But him and I were just having a discussion about this, and that's the third time I've heard somebody say that. They say the thing about the State Patrol, and I said it: all roads, all codes.
All codes. That's right.
You know, we could enforce every law that was on the book. No other law enforcement agency in the state could say that.
Yeah.
But you know what? When you talk to cops in other parts of California, they're like, "Oh, those chips, man! They would write their own freaking mother." And I said, "You ever met Morgan?"
Hey, I've made this very clear. I would never write my own mother a ticket. However, I would detain her, call another trooper over, and have him issue the ticket. But I would never do it personally myself. I never did that. Please, come on. Well, hey, before we diverge. Okay, so we also have a problem too. Is anytime. But I digress. If we digress, it's a drinking game. So that was your first digression. We kind of went off. So But I digress. Now back to our originally scheduled podcast. So, Gary, as we do with everybody in this thing that we call Cosa Nostra, thing of
Yeah.
ours, you have an interesting story, though. And all serious, all kidding aside, being serious, you had a start nobody wants to have to their law enforcement career.
Right.
That's correct. Yes, that is very true. Yeah, it was a reality check like none other. When you start in this business, and I started as a cadet, actually as an explorer in 1974, and then I became a cadet in 76, and then got hired on and sworn in 79. I'd known guys that had been in shootings, and I believe one of the guys that I had worked with had been shot at the small agency I worked for, but it still was not first and foremost in my mind, and certainly not where my father worked. My father worked in Marina del Rey, California, with the LA County Harbor Patrol. He did 20 years in the Coast Guard and got out as an E8, and went in 42, and so he went through the Pacific and World War II and came out unscathed, and then started a law enforcement career with them. And 15 years later, he's killed in the line of duty, stabbed to death.
Well, let's rewind before we get into
Sure.
that too, because that kind of, I wanted everybody to kind of understand where we're going with this, because you've already laid out one of the reasons you probably got into law enforcement. Was that one of the reasons, or for you, why did you decide, hey, I want to do this thing, called being a cop or being a deputy?
Yeah, actually, that was probably a major impetus for doing this. And there was one show that you guys might recall that I really loved. That was called Police.
Don't say Miami Vice. Whatever you do, don't say
it
Miami
wasn't
Vice.
Miami Vice.
That's 2 thumbs up.
I hope we probably all went through that attire style stage of Miami Vice. But anyway, it was called Police Story. It was written by it was written by Joseph Wambaugh, and those characters were 3-dimensional, and the stories were great and real. And even as a dumb adolescent, I always thought that show was fantastic for those reasons. And of course, with my father and everything, and hanging around with him, and then meeting a lot of sheriff's deputies, which was the agency that patrolled most of the terra firma around Marina del Rey, was the LA County Sheriff's Department. And so I got to meet a lot of those guys, and that's sort of how it all started.
So you were you born in California?
Culver City, Santa Monica.
Right.
Actually, born in Santa Monica, raised in Culver City. Both my mom and my dad are native Southern Californians. So
Very nice.
So, Murph, the other thing too is we do with everything in this one. So, just to let you know right up front, Gary, we dedicate this episode to Patrolman Harold L. Edgington, Los Angeles County Harbor Patrol, into watch September 30th, 1979. So,
Absolutely.
thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you.
And if you folks go to things like odmp.org, it's the Officer Down Memorial page, you will still see, to this day, Gary, and you probably have seen that up there too. You've got Rabbi Lewis back in 2021, people in 2020, years later, 30, 40 years later, people are still writing stuff on people's walls to remember their service.
Yeah, I'm actually getting chills right now thinking about it. You're absolutely right. In fact, on my webpage, I have a link to ODMP. I think they do a wonderful job of getting the word out, because most people have no understanding of the human toll that this business takes.
I'm looking at your webpage right now. Is that your dad there, right?
Yes. Yep.
Looking good. We're sorry for your loss, brother.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Even though we don't know him, we're all still part of the law enforcement family, and it affects us
If your
all.
name's on the wall, that's, we've all got friends who've been, names on the wall.
Yep.
But let's talk about that, because
Yes.
I mean, you got the impetus, but the way you found out about it happened in the academy.
Exactly. That's correct. My agency, the practice in the LA County Sheriff's Academy at that time was every other week you worked at your parent agency in a if it was a small agency, you worked patrol function, or you worked in the jail if you were with the sheriff's department. And so I went on patrol. I was working for Manhattan Beach Police Department, and I worked that evening graveyard shift with one of the officers as a trainee. And we handled, as you typically did in Manhattan Beach, surly drunks. And one guy kind of got a little frisky and, could have gone either way. It turned out it was okay. So that morning, I came home and Dad was getting ready for work. And so we sat down and had breakfast together and we talked about it. And we talked about use of force and what had happened and everything. And then we talked about the Eula Love case, which was a very controversial shooting in Los Angeles. Actually, it should not have been controversial, but it was. It's pretty straightforward. Basically, two LAPD officers were investigating an assault with a deadly weapon on a gas company employee. And were confronted by a female armed with a very large butcher knife, which she threw at them, and they shot her and killed her. And the fact of the matter is that it was reported in the media that the LAPD was there to collect on a gas company bill, which of course was complete rubbish. They were actually there investigating an assault on the gas company employee by the decedent. She hit him in the head, I believe, with a shovel because he was there to turn off her gas because she hadn't paid her bill. So we talked about it that morning. And so I know it was on his mind. And about 11:30 in the morning, I got up and the phone rang in the kitchen. And I picked it up, and it was one of my dad's friends and partners, Bob Dean. And Bob said, "Gary, your dad's been hurt. We need you to come to the hospital." And that was Marina Mercy Hospital. It was just 10-minute drive from my house. And I said, "So what happened?" And he said, he's been hurt badly. You need to come. And he rode, because of the nature of Marina del Rey with narrow breezeways and stuff. He actually rode a 3-wheel Harley Davidson motorcycle with a box on the back that you see some places. You see it in the Capitol. The DC PD uses them. Anyway, that's what he used. And so I asked him if he'd rolled it, and he said no, he was hurt. So I got to the hospital, and I was met by an LAPD Beach Patrol officer, and he put his hand on my shoulder and told me my dad was gone, and said that my dad had shot him, and that the round that he said, quote unquote, we just heard that was the round that killed the suspect. Well, he was trying to help me out and make me feel better, but that really was not the case. My dad did hit him, but that was not the fatal round. And so anyway, went in the hospital and saw his boots on the floor, and found out that he'd been stabbed to death. And then later on found out what happened and who the suspect was. He was a whack, what we call a 5150 in California. And he had been, in 1975, he had a spat with his roommate and picked up a rifle in Marina del Rey and started blazing. And my dad and a bunch of other guys responded and hooked him up. And then he was adjudicated as being criminally insane and packed off to a Tuscadero State Mental Hospital for the criminally insane. And then 18 months later, patted on the head, handed a bottle of Thorazine and told to be a good boy and take your pills and don't sin anymore, which, of course, he's a whack, so he didn't do that. He stopped taking his medicine. And the interesting thing about this whole thing, this was really a confluence, a perfect storm of circumstance, because as it turned out, they couldn't figure out why the suspect in this thing, who was dead because the responding sheriff's deputies dumped him. They couldn't figure out why he had my dad's business card in his wallet. Well, it turned out he had come in to beef my father. My father had been working as about 2 weeks before he'd been working as, or 3 weeks before he'd been working as the acting watch commander, and gotten a verbal altercation with this guy over the radio. And I happened to be there because I was starting the academy in a few days' time. And so I just wanted to talk to him before then. And so I actually heard this.
You heard the argument between your dad and the suspect?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Wow.
That was, and I was able to put that together. I was like, oh, wait a minute. I know who that is. That's the guy my dad was arguing with on this date at this time. Anyway, let me get back to what happened, because there are for law enforcement officers, there's a lot of lessons to be learned. My dad at first did not recognize the threat. There was a woman, a young lady who was a teacher, a college student who was teaching sailing, that felt like the suspect was coming after her first. The suspect was armed with a folding hunter buck knife, which, it's a pretty common knife. It's about a 3-inch blade, 3.5-inch blade. And he was screaming and yelling and raving at the top of his lungs. And he said, he started screaming at my dad saying, "You've got a gun, kill me." And so my dad started backpedaling, and he went around the motorcycle and put the motorcycle between him and the suspect. And the suspect broke into a ran and went around it. And at about 15 feet, my dad drew his weapon and fired one shot. Well, we come to find out that I know how I used to shoot with my dad all the time, and I know he used to shoot single action. So I'm sure the round went off before he wanted it to, because he was backpedaling, and probably, certainly he wasn't in a good shooting stance. And also he had a break front holster, and he didn't practice it with it much. And I'm sure he was not, like we all probably had a lot of tactical training in our careers. Well, he did not get a lot of tactical training. And his mindset was probably not what ours would have been in a similar situation, because he's in this idyllic place, Marina del Rey, on a Sunday afternoon, a beautiful Sunday afternoon, and this happens, So witnesses said as he pulled the weapon, he pulled it hesitantly or slowly. And I believe that is probably related to the fact that we had just discussed that morning this brouhaha about these LAPD officers shooting shooting a suspect armed with a knife. And I know in the back of my mind that probably caused some hesitation on his part. And so the suspect broke into a run, stabbed him in the solar plexus and knocked him down, and cut his right carotid artery and eviscerated him, took his gun, and went off about 50 yards or so and emptied the revolver. It was a Model 15 Smith. Emptied the revolver and then stuck it in his waistband and continued on. And of course, somebody picked up the radio and put out "Officer needs help, officer down," blah blah blah. And 2 sheriff's deputies responded and confronted him. And he slashed at them, and they fired a couple snapshots at him and missed him, and then they chased him across the street, and they were able to take aim and dump him, and then that was it. And I was in the 3rd week of the academy when that happened.
Man, that's devastating.
When you said he dumped the gun, did he fire it and dump it, or just open up the cylinder and dump it?
Opened up the cylinder and dumped the live rounds, the empty and the expended round and the 5 live rounds that were in the gun.
So this is a suicide by cop type mission for him.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
But you bring up something, Gary, there, though, and this is something that if you want to talk about, if there's a lesson here for folks, it's that you cannot watch the news and let that affect your judgment. And I'm not making judgments on your dad. I'm just saying, and I know in a place like that, Marina del Rey, I mean, hell, even George Strait wrote a song about Marina del Rey. It's a beautiful place,
Exactly. It is.
Nothing like that is supposed to happen in Marina del Rey,
Nothing before or since has happened like that in Marina del Rey.
I just pulled up. That's what I did. I just pulled up, on ODMP, you can look at the agency. So Los Angeles County Harbor Patrol, there's only one name listed. That's your father.
Yep. And I don't know if either of you are familiar with the place, but where the incident occurred, everything is still exactly the way it was back in 1979. And it's where the Cheesecake Factory is in Marina del Rey. It's where the actual assault took place, where the valet parking station is at the Cheesecake Factory in Marina del Rey.
This is our regular listeners have heard us say this before. This is a perfect example of how the media will take a story and twitch it any way they can to sensationalize it, because they're trying to bring in more viewers, which leads to more ad money. So we jokingly say that, like, Hollywood never lets the truth get in the way of a good movie or a good TV series, right? Well, it seems to be awfully true like that with the incident involving your dad here, because they erroneously reported what really happened to sensationalize it and to get that public response, which leads to more stories, which leads to more advertisers. So we challenge, not only here on the show, but my partner Javier Pena and I, when we do our speaking events, we challenge every audience: don't accept what we say or anybody else what they say as the gospel, as the truth. Go do your own research, and then you make up your mind. Don't let somebody else make up your mind for you. It's horrible what they published about your dad, and I bet there was no retraction or apology from him either, was there?
Well, you know what, I don't expect that. I mean, they just, like you said, they have a tendency to sensationalize. A lot of them are not terribly worldly and know very much. I'll never forget during the do you remember the SLA shootout in LA? It was a big deal back in the day. I was a
That
kid.
was the Symbionese, right? The
Symbionese
Symbionese
Liberation Army. I'll never forget watching it on the news as probably 12-year-old, 13-year-old boy, and seeing a LAPD unit show up taking a box, and I mean it was a big box, labeled federal, and it was ammunition, right? And the commentator says the LAPD is getting ammunition from the federal government. I mean, they just can't get it right. And I remember during the Rodney King case, one of the news people said that he had been hobbled, when in actual fact he was looking at the copper filament from the taser, which of course it's tiny. It's not a hobble. A hobble is a heavy rope thing. I mean, it's a hobble, but the news media guy, a pretty famous reporter in L.A., erroneously said that he had been hobbled and was being beaten while he was hobbled, when in fact they were looking at the copper filament from the taser, which had no effect.
Once again, don't let the truth get in the way of a good story.
There you go.
Murph, here's a trivia point for you. Who was the most famous member of the Symbionese Liberation Army?
Patty Hearst.
There you go.
Yeah,
I remember. Hey, I grew up during that same time watching that crap on TV. Holy cow!
Yeah.
Yeah, and there was a lot of stuff going on there. Which is going to serve us well for the rest of the story. But there was a lot of stuff going on during the 70s, when you had the protest groups, you had the terrorists, you had the underground, the Weather Underground, you had all of these different radical groups. People forget how dangerous it was back in the 70s. They think now Antifa's burning down stuff in Portland, places like that, Seattle. But people forget in the 70s, you had buildings being blown up. You had cops being murdered. You had people bombing the Pentagon, Bill Ayers bombing
Federal
the Pentagon.
Judges.
Federal judges being, absolutely.
Yeah. There were bombings at police stations in California, and I believe in Washington, D.C. It was a very tumultuous time, no question about it.
Well, so let's finish up on that, because I don't want this to, it's obviously a huge downer to start off that way, but very few stories of ours that we've talked to people start off the way yours did, which is you have a father in law enforcement who dies in the line of duty while you're in the academy getting ready to go in. How did that shape your worldview after that? What did it do to you that, had that not happened, you would have been different in some way? What did that do to you?
Well, because I knew that, I knew that, there were some circumstances there that perhaps I could learn from. I was never, Joe Tactical, but I always, and to this day, remain prepared and try to maintain situational awareness. And, I as soon as I was still in training, as a matter of fact, as soon as I was able to qualify, I started carrying a 45, and got rid of the 38 special. And, I always just felt like, it pays to be prepared. There are, you can't anticipate every problem, but you can prepare to deal with most.
I can't imagine how unbelievably distracting that would be for you, dealing with your dad and then trying to get through the police academy. Because, contrary to what a lot of people believe, academies are challenging.
Oh, yeah. Well, it was very challenging. And I took a week off of work or off of the academy. And the day I came back was a Monday. And we were in the middle of, they were doing a lecture on the vehicle code. So it was boring and interminable. And, and all of a sudden they stopped inexplicably. And they turned on the projector and started playing this training film that the sheriff's department produced years ago about the CHP Newhall shooting, where 4 CHP officers were killed. It's a bloody movie, and we'd seen that movie probably 3 or 4 times in the course of the academy training, and so I, to this day, am convinced that they purposely did that to see if I would lose it, if I could hold it together. And I did. Obviously I wasn't thrilled about it, but I pressed on and graduated with my class. And,
I'm not sure I could have held it together.
Well, you would have. You would have.
But you know what I want to find out, if that was actually what somebody did, I would have liked to take that sick bastard out back and kick his ass for a little bit, going, what the hell are you thinking?
Yeah.
Let's how about one of your family members killed? We come in and we do something to you a week later.
Yeah.
I get that what they want to do, but guys, this isn't extreme SEAL training stuff. We had Kevin Holland on for that. We're just talking about that. I mean, and even then they wouldn't do stuff like that. It's just like, I don't know that's the case, but if that's the case, my question is, what the hell were you thinking?
Right. Well, it was, we never saw it again. And like I said, we saw it on the first day, which is to scare the heck out of all the new guys in the academy. And then we saw it a couple more times. And this is the beginning of week 4. And, and they do it on the first day I'm back from this, which didn't, I don't know if this had happened before in the academy's history, and I don't know if it's happened since. I know another individual in my class lost his father, but it wasn't a law enforcement rated thing. It was a health issue. So my law enforcement cop's gut tells me that it was to see how I would deal with it.
Yeah.
And, it was a different age back then.
A lot different.
Things are really different. I started in 82. I know Murph started in what, 07 or something like that, right?
Yeah, that's your 07 right here. Yeah. 75.
Murph had to park his horse out front and make sure it was tied up so he wouldn't lose his ride.
You don't want that damn thing to have to chase it, man. I can't catch it.
I'll tell you what, man. The funniest thing is watching you chase down the horse. Hey, come back here. Horse ain't going to listen to you. Stop. But Gary, so let's talk about that, because you got through the academy. Let me ask you about that movie, though, that shooting. I think, was that like 1967 or something, 68?
No, it was early 70s. It was up in Newhall, which is north of LA, in LA County. Yeah. And it was in the early 70s.
Okay. Did that, when they showed that on that day, did that cause any of the recruits to drop out?
Oh, no. By the beginning of the 4th week, unless you fail, the weak ones are gone by then, for the most part. And now it's if you fail because of some sort of, physical test or a written test or something like that, but they pretty much weeded out most of the people by week 4, So no, I don't think anybody left after that for that reason.
Okay. So it was April 1970.
April 1970. I know it was close, around that time, yeah. Well, let's talk about getting in, because I noticed one of the places, and I have to ask you, one of the places you worked at was Beverly Hills.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Did you get to really meet Axel Foley?
Good old Axel Foley, the gift that keeps on giving. In actual fact, as I told somebody the story the other day, the police department was built in 1932. It was not the state-of-the-art facility that you see depicted in the film. And we had, when we would bring a prisoner in, we would come in through a carport on the ground floor, walk them over to the elevator, and the elevator was about as big as a call box. I mean, it was tiny, and it was circa 1932. And we'd take them up 3 flights up to the jail, and it was an old style jail with hand levers and all kinds of weird stuff and everything. So no, there was no. The only scene from that film that was shot, my understanding, in Beverly Hills was an exterior when Axel Foley is being bailed out, and they show him leaving the city hall. He walks out the front door of City Hall, and that's the only thing. Now, the interesting thing is, I was booking a prisoner, talking to the watch commander, and while all the filming was going on, and I noticed this guy standing out outside in the hallway outside the watch commander's office, and I said, "Who's this guy?" Because his uniform was perfect, his leather gear, weapon, badge, it all looked right. I'm sure if I got up close and looked at it, I would see that there was it was, some of it was fake, but he looked absolutely as real as could be, and it was an extra, and standing inside the station, probably related to that exterior shot that they were doing, but none of it was filmed inside the station. Now they have a modern facility, but back then they did not.
You guys didn't look exactly like that going to work every day in Beverly Hills?
Blonde hair, buff. So
Damn
are you
right.
saying you were on Beverly Hills PD when the movie was being shot?
Yeah.
No.
Yeah.
Well, I knew. That's why I asked. Did you ever meet? So, did you get a chance to meet Eddie Murphy and get some
No.
of his tactics or anything?
Oh, no. Not sure I'd want any
Probably
of his
good.
tactics.
Hey, if you ever want to meet him, just let me know. I'll call Cousin Eddie and make an intro for you.
But you know what? The guy that was his chief back in Detroit was an honest to God Detroit cop.
Oh, really?
Yeah, he was, and that's a lot of people didn't realize that. So the guy who played that was and he tell you what, he sounded like a honest to God somebody. You get your ass back here. It wasn't one of these things like, hey, would you please come back like they do in Beverly Hills? It was Axel.
Oh, that's the way it
Oh
is.
my God! Oh, what fun! Well, look, you did a lot of municipal work. I mean, you went through Manhattan Beach, Beverly Hills, even the LA County district attorney. What made you want to leave real police work and go to work for an attorney?
Well, at least he didn't go to the dark side.
2150 to headquarters. Yeah, while I was at Beverly Hills, I worked detectives for 3 years. And when I was a cadet at Culver City, I worked in detectives. And so I really got bitten by the detective bug. And almost, with the exception of about 4.5 years, almost my entire career has been spent in some sort of investigative role or as a manager or whatever, investigators. And I went to the DA's office because I wanted to continue working as an investigator, it's because I'd gone back to patrol. It's hard when you've been a detective and you really enjoyed it to go back to patrol. And I had to. And so that's when I started looking around for strictly investigative agencies that I could transfer over to or move to.
Well, talk about, there's a unique relationship. You don't see it in many places. We see it in New York. I had some buddies of mine from NYPD on. Murph and I did an episode with Tommy Joyce and his buddy Mike, and they, you've got DA's offices up there. In fact, one of the guys we talked to, I think it was episode 13, was it Dominic Polifrone? Dominic worked for Bergen County DA.
Mm-hmm.
There are some unique relationships. So how does that relationship work in LA? Because, I mean, when you think of famous counties and famous district attorneys, there's only a handful of those around the country. They're known. Usually you think of NYPD, you think of New York, and you think of LA. So how does that relationship work when you go there? How do the cases come out? How do you make sure that you're not stepping on each other's toes? And at the end of the day, ultimately, who has jurisdiction? If there's a homicide, is it you? Is it LA Sheriff? Is it LAPD? How does that work?
Well, primarily it is the agency's handle until charges are filed. and I believe arraignment or preliminary hearing. After preliminary hearing, it we become, or the DA's office became responsible for all of the investigative aspects of the case, including all the trial support things, follow-up investigation, locating witnesses, other things. Um, I would say that we worked very, very closely with virtually every agency. And had a great working relationship with all of them. But also the DA's office had original jurisdiction cases. Welfare fraud was original jurisdiction. A major fraud, we had a major fraud unit that had original jurisdiction. In environmental protection and OSHA cases were original jurisdiction cases. And we had a major narcotics unit that I worked in organized crime, and they were original jurisdiction cases. And so, I did some pretty good drug cases when I worked there, and they were dope cases. As if I had worked for a local agency or a federal agency. It was, in fact, one of them was a Quaalude case.
Well, I went to an Atlanta rhythm section. There's a name from the past, the Atlanta rhythm section. I went to a concert in college, and they go, "Hey, we're here for doing this," and they said, and then he goes, "And then for those of you on Quaaludes."
I was going to say, if you're talking Quaaludes, man, you're dating yourself.
Yeah, no kidding. These were facsimiles of they were methoqualone, but they were facsimiles, and they were being manufactured illicitly in Mexico. And
Well, I'm shocked. Wait a minute. You mean this is not anything new that we're having with Mexico with fentanyl, and you mean Mexico's been involved in drug trafficking this long?
Sadly, yes, I believe that is correct. Yes.
And I'm not knocking the citizens of Mexico. I'm just saying I just get tired of hearing everybody thinks like this thing with fentanyl, like it's a new thing, like the human trafficking is a new thing. No, we've been having these issues with transportation and creation of synthetic dope, fake stuff for a long time.
Well, I mean, Narcos did a whole series on Kiki Camarena. That ought to. And then not long after that, Cortez, right, was another agent that was kidnapped and in Mexico. So,
Hector was tortured also, but he was able to get away.
Right.
Yeah,
right.
guys went and got him.
I worked with a couple of guys that were familiar with that Leanda case. Yeah,
that's a whole nother topic right there.
That's a whole other episode there. But the other thing too, because the reason I'm kind of gliding through some of this, because we're going to talk about some of the work you did overseas. You've had a unique path that a lot of cops don't take, but you went from the LA District Attorney's Office, and then you ended up becoming. Now, here's the other thing I want you to talk about too, because I've noticed CHP, the California Highway Patrol, seems to have broadened a lot of their authorities, and a lot of things they get involved in. But there's also many states you go into, they either will have a state police or they'll have a state patrol with a state bureau of investigation. California is a little different. Tell us now about how this structure with Cal DOJ and CHP and the food fight that I know is coming.
Structure, I think you're assuming facts, not in evidence. There is no structure. Basically, it's an alphabet soup of agencies. I actually, when I lived in California, I was an advocate for a Department of Public Safety agency that oversaw all of these functions, and certainly would save the taxpayers a lot of money and made things a lot easier. But in California, you had the Lottery Commission, you had Department of Motor Vehicles, you had Fish and Game, you had the Medical Board, you had the Dental Board, you had the Board of Pharmacy, you had all these boards, and they all had peace officer status. They were all, sworn peace officers. And then you had the Department of Justice, which is in essence like, the state's Bureau of Investigation, and we had the Bureau of Narcotics Enforcement, which was world renowned for their training and and skills in narcotics enforcement. We had an air wing, we had all of these things. And I think when I came on, we had about probably, I think, close to 400 or 500 agents, special agents throughout the state. So the Department of Justice works for the Attorney General, but obviously we had original jurisdiction cases. We also did trial support cases for the deputy attorney generals, but that was pretty rare. Most of the work I did were original jurisdiction cases involving things that we started from day one and worked up.
So Cal DOJ would that be similar to like Florida Department of Law Enforcement? It's
FDLE,
not the troopers,
GBI, absolutely.
Yeah, there you go.
Absolutely,
okay.
Exactly like that.
Did you know, was B&E, the Bureau of Narcotics Enforcement, was that part of the Cal DOJ?
That was it. That I hired on with B&E. And then after 2 years, I went over to the Bureau of Investigation, which was in the same office. But yeah, we worked major narcotics cases,
Did you ever know a guy named Ron Brooks?
Of course. Oh, yeah. You
Brooks
bet.
Brooks
Hard not
friend.
To know Ron Brooks. You have to work at that.
He's doing pretty well now.
Yeah. Yeah, he's a good guy. I haven't seen Ron in years. He's a good man.
He was at IECP last week.
Oh, really?
Doing his thing, down in Dallas.
Wow. Yeah,
so
good.
Tell everybody who Ron Brooks is. I mean, you guys are laughing. It's an inside joke, but you said he's doing pretty well now. What are we talking about?
You know what? Beats the shit out of me what he's doing now. I don't know. Was he a HIDTA director? He ran a bunch of different things. He was. I believe he retired as a special agent, a senior special agent in charge in the San Francisco, Sacramento area, and then he was he's heavily involved with the California Narcotics Officers Association, CNOA, and has been involved in, intelligence, fusion center projects.
Yeah, he's one of the principals in a lobby group now that's based out of D.C.
Okay.
Where they work a lot with the HIDTAs, all the law enforcement groups.
Yeah. Okay.
To try to get legislation passed, at least introduced through some of the different congressmen.
Yeah, he's pretty much, as long as I've known him, he has been in the forefront of narcotics enforcement and an advocate for narcotics enforcement. The Bureau of Narcotics Enforcement was disbanded by Kamala Harris when she was the Attorney General.
Why?
Well, there are a lot of explanations. Budget constraints has been suggested as one of the reasons, but they basically cut the workforce of the Division of Law Enforcement, which was what Bureau of Investigation and the Bureau of Narcotics Enforcement were under, about by half, I believe. With that, they disbanded the Bureau of Narcotics Enforcement. A few years later, they were asking why did they do that? Because they suddenly found themselves in the midst of all these narcotics epidemics, starting with heroin and pharmaceuticals, and then now fentanyl. And there is no dedicated narcotics enforcement agency there. It's all now falls on the shoulders of local law enforcement agencies. And we had task forces throughout the state of California. I don't even know how many task forces we had. And the task force commanders were DOJ special agent supervisors that were promoted into task force commander position. And we provided all of the coordination and, infrastructure for those task forces. And they were everywhere, and they were incredibly successful and did an amazing job. And that's pretty much all gone now. Thank you very much.
Yeah, that's nice, isn't it?
It's very impressive.
All the DEA offices in California have a very, very robust task force program where the state and locals, get their guys cross-deputized there so that they can not only enforce state and local law, but also federal law when it comes to narcotics. So
exactly.
What a shame.
It really is. It's pathetic is what it is, but that's another story.
Yeah, and I'm not asking that to be political because we stay away from politics. But when you
Right.
look at stuff and you go, California, let me think. You look at it; it's a border state as well too. So you got everything coming through, yeah, Mexico up that way. You've got, you've got cartel activity left and right going on out there. It was a big transship. It was a big destination point. Hell, we had George Young on here, Pablo's business partner. Where do you think he was delivering a bunch of his cocaine to?
Hmm.
Frickin' California. And I'm just
Southern
thinking,
California. Yeah.
why
Yeah.
would you want to disband a statewide agency that would focus on? I mean, granted, not every state has its own separate state agency, but California is not most states. When you think of how many people in that state now, 38 million,
Yeah.
whatever, it's bigger than many countries are,
Right.
Mhm.
I
that have
don't.
their.
I'm sure you've heard the statistic that California has, uh, I don't know, a astronomical, rating as far as one of the largest economies in the world.
Mhm.
Were it to separate from the United States, it would have, this huge economy and all these other things. Yeah. But, to me, it's inexplicable. And I have heard whispers of why this really happened, but I don't know for sure, so I wouldn't comment.
I mean, not to make derogatory remarks against our vice president, but we know what politicians do. They will tell you what you want to hear to get your vote. And I'm going to guess that's probably what was going on back then. There was some kind of movement to do away with that because people were going to jail for breaking the freaking law.
Well, I mean, certainly the medical marijuana or the recreational marijuana business was huge in California, and they have heavy political war chests, and probably a great deal of clout in Sacramento. So that could have been part of it. The then governor, Jerry Brown, who, remember Jerry Brown? He used to run for
Oh, yeah.
president about every 5 minutes, it seemed like.
Moonbeam Jerry Brown.
Jerry Brown, yeah. The Agents Association did not support him in the election. They supported, I don't remember, somebody else. And he got a little miffed at that, I believe. And not long after that, the budget started getting the chop. So it doesn't take a brain surgeon to figure that one out.
Well, gee, let's kind of game that out all the way. So really, are you hurting the agents or are you hurting the communities and the people who don't need this stuff in their communities? At the end of the day, you end up hurting the ones you love, and that's exactly what he did.
Yeah.
Well, not to mention they're in Sacramento, and I mean, LA is like crime central. It's like that's where all the crime starts and then spreads from there on down through Southern California, the Mexican border. And God bless our police officers down there and all of our first responders that put up with that crap. But there's a big difference between LA and Sacramento.
Yeah. Huge difference. And, LA, one of our leading exports for a long time was criminal gangs. And, and a lot of the gangs that are now in other parts of the country in the Midwest got their start in California. It's another thing to be proud of.
Yeah. Such a beautiful state. And that
it's tragic. It really is tragic because California is an extraordinary place. It truly is.
So I'm springing this on Murph. He doesn't realize we're doing it this way, but we're doing a two-part thing now. We've got a new format coming up, and you're our first victim. So because you're our first victim, you didn't know that so what we're going to do is this is going to be the end of part one. We're letting everybody know right now. This is the end of part one. This is kind of setting the stage. We're getting a good grasp of your experience, what's going on. We'll have our intro, but then when we get into part two, though, this is when we really start diving into your assignment to the Joint Terrorism Task Force, some of the work you did overseas, coming back. I want to talk about Gitmo and places like that. So let's bring the end of part one to a close. Part two will come out Monday. This comes out on Monday. Part two comes out on Tuesday. So this is our new format. You're a first guinea pig. What do you got to say, Murph? You got that look on your face.
Yeah, no, just for our listeners that are listening to this new way we're doing things, let us know what you think about it because we've done interviews that are as long as 5 hours, and so we're trying new things here. So let us know what your opinion is after you listen to Gary's interview here. Both parts. Don't just listen to one part.
Part one is Monday. Part two is Tuesday. So you guys stay tuned. Everybody, hang on. Part two's coming up in 24 hours.